Welcome to Disruptive Successor, a show for next generation leaders in family businesses and entrepreneurs who want to disrupt the status quo and take their existing business to a whole new level. We all know that what got us here isn't going to get us there. This show will provide inspiration, advice, and resources to help you create massive impact. Hey, this is Jonathan Goldhill, and welcome to another episode of the Disruptive Successor Show. And today I have a very special guest, someone who I'm just getting to know and whom I think you're going to get a lot of value from. His name is David Karofsky, and David is a principal consultant with the Family Business Consulting Group, and they specialize in advising family businesses around the challenges and opportunities inherent to the family business. They are arguably the grandfather of business consulting to families in this country. The founders of that firm have written many books, and we're not going to get into that because we'll hopefully have some of those guests later on this show. David's work has been focused on building alignment around communication, executing the transition of ownership and leadership, conflict resolution, which, as you know, is in my book, Disruptive Successor, strategic planning, which is also in there, and forming governance structures for family businesses, which is a subject I did not touch upon. So we'll want to hear a little bit about that. He's the recipient of multiple achievement awards. David has been a guest speaker internationally as co-author of So You're in the Family Business, A Guide to Sustainability. So David, introduce yourself. What did I miss in that introduction?
Boy, you hit it all, John. Thank you very much for having me on the show. It's an opportunity, and love talking about family business and love meeting new people and just sharing my stories. You pretty much hit it all. I mean, I've been working with family businesses now for 20 plus years in different ways, and then really drilling into the world of family business consulting for a little over a decade. And started my quick story is I grew up in a family business. My father was third generation in our family's wholesale wallpaper distribution business in Boston. My great grandmother, when she came over from Russia in 1915, started the business. My great grandfather was a wallpaper hanger, and so she was an incredibly entrepreneurial woman. She opened up a retail store. She sold it, and he hung it. And the family joke was that was her way of keeping him out of the bar and off the track. And it kept him busy. And it evolved from there. My grandfather took it over and turned it into distribution, changed it from retail to distribution. And then he and my dad grew it. And it was at one point the largest wallpaper distribution business in New England.
Wow. So we can talk about transitions and the importance of transitions, which, as you know, is so important in businesses. I've always said to people, someone once gave me this wisdom, like in my business, every 3 to 5 years, I've had to reinvent my business model, how I deliver it. And, here we hear a transition in that business.
And then we reinvented ourselves again. My dad sold the business. He went off, was doing consulting. He started doing family business consulting along the same time that Craig Aronoff and John Ward of FBCG did it. And then I joined my dad back in 2009 after I had a career doing a bunch of different stuff. I joined him as a father-son family business consulting practice. And so it was an evolution, clearly from distribution, but it was an opportunity for my dad and I to work together, which was fantastic. We did a lot of work together. We wrote a book together called, like you said, So You're in the Family Business. And that was kind of a culmination of our work in 2016 together.
So let's dissect this a little bit. You got into the family business, which was a consulting practice, after the wallpaper business had been sold. Had you ever been in the wallpaper business too?
As a kid, I was 18 when he sold it. So I had spent summers and, and vacations, cutting samples in the storeroom. but never had the chance to full-time actively work in it.
Okay, so how did you feel, if you can remember when you were 18? Take us back to where you were. Were you career-minded? Were you thinking like, oh gosh, my bed just got short-sheeted? Or were you
Right.
thinking like, I never really wanted to be in that business anyway? What was going on?
I think I probably would have gone into the business with my dad if he hadn't sold it. I used to go in and love sitting with him and my grandfather and talking about that stuff. But at 18, I was worried about, what my next baseball game was going to be and where am I pitching. I wasn't the business oriented kind of guy. I was getting ready to go to college. And the industry changed. And one of the things we have to understand in family business is that industries change. And when we see opportunities, sometimes the best thing to do is to sell and harvest the business. There's an old question that we always have to ask. Does the family serve the business, or does the business serve the family? And it's a question that we all have to ask ourselves. And at differing times, the answer can go either way. This time, it was time for the business to serve the family. And so my dad saw the opportunity and he sold it. And I look back on that it was it was the right decision. It was a positive move, and it was a great move for my dad because it opened up a whole nother career for him that he absolutely loved.
So tell us about that career and tell us about the decision for you to join forces with him, and talk about your relationship with your dad also, because that's really important. That's an important piece of this, isn't it?
It's a big piece of this. So my dad sold the business. He went back to Harvard Business School, got a master's in counseling, psychology, and education. He got connected with Northeastern University here in Boston and started their Center for Family Business. And that opened up his door into the world of family business consulting. Meanwhile, I was in college. I went to grad school. I got a master's in counseling psychology as well. I was actually going to do sports psychology originally. And just kind of life took over. I ended up doing a bunch of different things. Got my MBA, ended up doing a startup tech company for a couple of years. We sold it, and that brings me to 2009. So very quick jump here. I had sold the business, and my dad turned to me and he goes, well, what's next? And my father was he was my guy, right? He was the guy who I would pick up the phone and say, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And he was always there to really give me very sound, very honest advice. And so I was lucky to have him. And he said to me, he goes, I'm getting a little gray. I'm getting a little old. And I feel like maybe I'm not connecting with the younger generation as well as you could in this world of family business. And would you be interested in joining me? And, we can create our own company. He already had it. Join me. Let's be partners together. And it might be able to set you up for something, to create a path for you long term. And that's what we did. And I remember very vividly, we sat down. I was in Florida at a conference, and my dad drove up from Palm Beach. I was in Orlando. He drives up from Palm Beach, and we sit down, and we had a real serious conversation as to what this thing would look like, and expectations and roles and responsibilities and all the things that we preach as consultants to do within our families. We had to do it ourselves. And I call it, we had to eat our own dog food. Because if we didn't, what right do I have to sit across the table from somebody else and tell them how to run their business if I can't do it myself?
Correct.
And we did it. And it was looking good. That Thanksgiving, like a month later, I sat down with my mother and my wife and my sister and my dad, and the five of us talked about what my father and I were exploring, and they were really excited and supportive of us. And we wanted to make sure that our family, we were really open and transparent, and we wanted their support, that there was going to be no issues, no expectations, all the kind of boundary pieces that we talk about. We did that with our own family. And it worked out, and it it was a great run.
So this is interesting, and let's shift gears a little bit from your family business to some other family business, because it's not always that easy. Like, you guys were starting together and you were a consulting firm. So, most people know that it doesn't take much in the way of equipment or assets, or investment to get a consulting firm going.
Right.
But had you guys decided to start a wallpaper distribution or retail store, and had he maybe come with more experience and more money, and you had maybe a different angle on things, or maybe, think of a case study of a client that you've worked with. How do we deal with the equity situation or the inequities that, people bring different levels of expertise? Brothers, siblings bring different levels of commitment, interest, and drive to the business. Talk about some of those nuances.
So you're absolutely right, John. They do. And the question is, what's the value? Why is one level of expertise any more or less valuable than something else? Expertise in sales and marketing versus expertise in distribution or HR.
Mm-hmm.
HR doesn't sell the product, doesn't pay the bill, so to speak. So there sometimes can be this higher value placed on the sales and marketing people.
Always, right?
Well, yeah, but you got to understand that without one, you don't have the other. That without the employees and without HR and without managing the operations of the business, you don't have products and services to sell on the other end. So I really work in different clients that I work with. We always have to understand where's the highest, best use of our individuals, and also understand that fair and equal in family business are not the same.
Correct.
Growing up, I had a sister, and if there was, the joke was if there was 2 cookies left for dessert, I got a cookie and my sister got a cookie. In life, and in family business, and in business in general, not everyone's always going to get the cookie. And we have to understand that compensation really is where it comes into play a lot, John. That, the concept of every family member should be paid the same, regardless of whether you're, VP of sales or sweeping the floor. And I fundamentally don't agree with it. It's at the end of the day, the families have to make the decision. So I support that. But I fundamentally don't agree with it because it really sets up some very, very false expectations as to the value and how people work. And yes, that's equal, but is it fair?
Well, I never ascribe to equal pay because different positions are valued at different rates. And I think they should be paid a market rate value.
I agree.
And if you want to give a small premium to a family member, but don't make it more than 5 or 10%, because that's bad blood across the organization. But
it also sets up entitlement, which is something
totally.
We have to guard so carefully against being an entitled family member in the family business, because it can be incredibly destructive.
100%. But now, how do we layer the equity distribution?
Okay. So this is where I was just going to go there.
Okay, great.
This is where I believe it's very, very important to separate ownership from leadership or management.
Correct.
2 different things. As owners, if you're in an S corp and you got 4 owners and each one owns 25%, it's equal. You may have 2 owners that don't even work in the business, but they're investors and they go off and they do whatever they do. They don't work the operations of the business, so maybe they're not paid a salary.
Right.
But their distributions and their equity is equal. That is, that's obvious kind of, and that's perfectly okay. When it comes into the family business and we're trying to decide who are the owners, how do we pass ownership, what does that look like? I really encourage the families with which I work to separate the concept of leadership and ownership, that they're not the same conversation. They're very, very different.
So let's say you have some siblings that are not involved in the business and some that are involved in the business. And my tendency is to give a much greater preference of equity to those that are involved in the business. But and then to look outside of the business for some estate value to distribute so that you can bring some
Ideally.
parity. But that doesn't always exist. A lot of owners' wealth is tied up in their business, and
That's
they don't
right.
have liquidity in their real estate. So, so some kids get left with nothing, and other kids get left what seems like, a good chunk of the equity in the business.
Which tends to be the estate of mom and dad.
Yep.
And so that's where the equal and fair conversation comes up again. And I would tend to agree with you that if you can create the scenario where those working in the business can own the business, or at least have the controlling stake in the business, if you can take care of family members with other assets, that's ideal. Like we said, that's not always the case. And if it's not, this is where I also really encourage that we get clarity on understanding the difference between voting shares and non-voting shares. Reclassify your ownership so that there is a distribution or a difference between owning a business and having the value versus owning the business and making the decisions. That those running the company really should have, in my opinion, the controlling vote and the controlling decisions as to where they're going to go with the business, or how do they construct a board if they're going to do that, for example, versus ones that aren't working in the business, but they're lucky enough to be a child of the founder. They're entitled to their ownership, and I get that, but we have to be able to separate who makes what decisions as owners in the business.
So walk me through the scenario of when are these conversations held, where and when? Are they done one-on-one first, and then, sort of, I guess that's called Machiavellian, and then go out and do, have it as a group, or do you bring it as a group discussion and facilitate it at Family Business Consulting Group? How do you do that?
It can be a little bit of both. I don't have a cookie cutter or model that I always subscribe to. I like to, my model basically is I'm going to deliver what the client needs. And, years and years ago, someone once said, family businesses are like snowflakes. From far away, they all look the same, but close up, every single one is different.
Good
And it's
point.
true. And you have to treat businesses differently. So I've done everything from, maybe I'll meet with mom and dad first and say, okay, what's your vision for your ownership? What's going on? How do you want to pass your assets and your business down to the next generation? And I might start with them. I might interview each of the children to get a sense. I never like going into family meetings with a surprise. I always want to know where each of the players stand, because that way I can manage and facilitate the meeting far more effectively.
Understood. Same way I feel about going into a strategic planning session.
Absolutely.
I need to know each person, where are the skeletons, who's got issues. And so
ultimately, I want to get to the point where we can have family meetings collectively about it, because I am a firm believer that if the family collectively takes part in the process, the likelihood of buy-in is far greater. And so I may start with individuals, but then it's kind of like a puzzle. I'll take the family puzzle and I'll break it down, and then I'll build it back up. And it's the building back up, it's the process of these discussions that's as valuable as the outcome itself.
So supposing, David, that you've got someone who's got an older leadership style, let's call it more, command and control, authoritarian style. He's the prototypical, like, I'm going to die at my desk, and if I'm 85. And maybe at worst, he doesn't want to even deal with talking about an estate plan, because that's all looking at his, morbidity as,
you see it all the time.
Yeah, I bet. And so the authoritarian style on one end, the other at the other end is like completely abdicating authority because, he just doesn't know how to deal with it. Like, you've got everything in between. It's challenging, right?
It's very challenging. I've seen everything in between from, mom and dad they'll never let go, and we're going to take them out in a horizontal pine box, to mom and dad I'm out, see ya, we just bought a boat and we're going to go sail the 7 seas, and good luck, and if you have a question, good luck, you can catch me on my mobile phone. it is different. The way that we have to deal with it, for somebody who's kind of on the side of, I'm going to die at my desk, we have to try and tap into how do they let go and how does the younger generation take hold. One of the props that I use is I have a baton, and I share and I give this to clients, and I say, listen, guys, mom and dad may have their hand on the baton, but we've got to get your hand on it. And for a while, you're going to run with it together. But then your job is to pull the baton out of dad's hand or mom's hand. And if we can't do it, and if they don't have the confidence that you can run the business, they're never going to let go.
So how often do you leverage outside advisors, directors to influence this decision?
I will utilize or access or work with the advisors that are close to the family, the accountants, the lawyers, if there's a financial advisor, kind of mom and dad's key people that they rely on.
Yep.
I like it because they can give me a perspective of the business. But I also want to tap into the resources that the children have. When I go into an engagement, I'm a neutral, right? I don't work for mom or dad. I don't work for anybody. I work for the family and I work for the business. And I'm very adamant about that right off the bat, because that's the only way I can build trust with everybody.
Yep.
And so I'll work with those resources, and I'll also pull in colleagues, of mine all the time to do some specific work in a business. One of the things when we're talking about succession, and this will kind of go into something I think you want to talk about, is the use of boards. One of the benefits, and I help build boards from the ground up, or I'll build boards, or help evolve boards as they're already in place. One of the tools that I have found a board to be incredibly useful for is this transition, because it actually gives us a place for leadership to go and still have oversight and governance, while creating some space at the upper echelon of the business to allow the next generation to start to take leadership positions. And it's been a very useful. I've used it a number of times with clients to do that, and it has been a useful tool in that sense.
And let's clarify, because are we talking about boards of advisors, boards of directors?
It could be both. When you're starting out like that, it's most likely, it could be a family board. It may not even be they can call it a board of directors, they can call it whatever they want. But, the evolution that I see in boards is it often starts as a family board. Mm-hmm. It might be mom and dad and the 3 kids.
Right.
And they're talking, it could be, it could be over a Sunday dinner, over Chinese food, or it could be over, whatever. But they're starting to talk about the business, and they're starting to talk about strategy and oversight. And I like to let that evolve over a few years or several years. Eventually, it might move into a board of advisors where maybe you bring in 1 or 2 independent advisors, but it's not as intimidating as a board of directors. A board of directors can feel intimidating to a family owner because they feel like they're losing control, although they're not. And one of the misnomers is, well, if I have a board of directors and they make the decision, I lose control of the business. And I try to reassure our families that that's not, in fact, the case, because you control the board. If you have the ownership position, you vote the board, you can control the board. We can even get really specific as to what types of decisions a board makes versus ownership. And it's not the same in every single business. So I like the evolution because it's kind of like, crawl, walk, run, right? And start slow and move up. And it's listen, this could be over 2 or 3 generations of a family business that this evolution takes place.
Exactly. Understood. And I don't know, I'm sure I find myself when I'm in those situations being kind of the general contractor, or sort of
I use that same term.
Yeah, like the quarterback, 100%. Right?
Yep.
And my role is to facilitate the process, the open dialogue, to be available if there's conflict, and to be able to take them through maybe some constructive conflict conversation type processes. So it sounds like you are in that same role.
Very much. And that's where, I may act as a GC to a family. And if I need, I brought in a colleague on a family business the other day, a colleague of mine from Family Business Consulting Group, because he's really good at executive coaching, one-on-one executive coaching. So I brought him in. That's not my expertise. And so I brought him in to do some executive development work with a couple of the younger generation family members. I'll bring in another resource, either within my firm or without, to do legal or build the shareholder agreement, or do some specific work on shareholder development or family office. I'm bringing in a colleague on another client who's an expert in family offices. So she's going to help me really help the family form their first family office together.
Great.
So great resources at my hand.
Give us what's one of your favorite case studies that you like to share with people. I'm sure you have one, and
I have some. It's funny. In the first line, one of the first lines of the book that my dad and I wrote is, every client always asks us, "Are we the most dysfunctional family you've ever worked with?" And the answer is always no, except for one, right? There's only one. So I've got a lot of kind of stories like that, but the real positive story, I've been working with a client for 4 years now, a father and two sons in the business, and it's just a great story. Dad built the business, and really he brought his kids in their kind of late 20s, so they really didn't work somewhere else, which is something, if I had gone in prior to the kids coming in, I would have very highly encouraged them to go work somewhere else, but they didn't. And it's okay, sometimes that works out. I would have encouraged them to do that if I had the opportunity. But this family, what I love about working with them, and I see them just about on a monthly, I used to see them every month, now I see them kind of every other month or maybe once a quarter. They embraced the work that we did, and they embraced the change that needed to happen. And Dad is now starting to transition out of his role as running the day-to-day operations. They've brought in a non-family president for probably the next decade or so to run the business as the kids get older and start to build their experience. It's just a really, they say thank you for my work as much as I say thank you for working with them. And it's a pleasure. And it's a great engagement. It was really challenging at many ways, and a wonderful opportunity at another.
Now, is there a point in time where the you said brothers, I think, are, as they get to an age where they could run the business, where they'll kick out the non-family member CEO, and
they won't kick him out as much as he'll retire. I mean, there's a definitive plan in place that he's in there. He's been in there now for 4 years. He'll be in there for another 6, and roughly, give or take. But he knows that as he transitions out, they'll be transitioning up. And, they're each taking over divisions of the company right now, so getting that leadership experience so that when that time comes, they'll be ready.
Yeah, I think that would be a delicate issue. I do think there are some good statistics, you probably know them, about how much longer family businesses employ people versus non-family businesses. The tenure is much longer. But coming in as an outside non-family member into a CEO role, you kind of probably want to know, like, okay, when's my exit out of there, or do I have a contract? Because otherwise something changes in the family and Junior grows up and he wants to run the business now. So
we put a very definitive plan in place. He had been with the company for quite a while already, and so we knew the family very well. So we didn't pluck someone from outside. We moved somebody up. But we were very clear, or the family was very clear on the expectations of his role, and he was very comfortable with it. He didn't want a life sentence as the CEO. He's like a few years younger than the CEO, and so the timing was right, and it was really clear what the plan was.
Good. Any other thoughts you want to share with people about challenges in terms of generational transfer, building governance?
I think some people always ask, well, what are the top challenges you have in your work right now? Right now in the industry of family business consulting, there's a huge transition going on, right? Everyone's saying you'll see the biggest transition of wealth in our nation's history over the next 10 to 15 years. Assets, business, the baby boomers are getting older. The next generation is starting to age up. So there will be this massive, massive transition. And I encourage everybody, family and non-family, be open, be transparent, communicate. I can't say that enough, that the successful businesses and families that I see are the ones that can develop the ability to have open, candid, transparent conversations, knowing that not every single one of them is going to be easy, but really be open to kind of going there and having those difficult conversations with the opportunity for that positive outcome that we want to get on the other end.
Gotcha. So, yeah, we've been long hearing about this tsunami of businesses that would be for sale because of the coming of age of baby boomers. And so communication is key to keeping it in the family, making the transition. And I think what we're seeing is that tsunami turned into a wave, not a tsunami. And my friend wrote a book called Half Retire. And I think that we're seeing a lot of people who are half retiring. They're staying in. Are you seeing this? They're staying in the business,
no doubt.
Continuing to make money and letting their kids run the business, but they haven't really let go. They still have their hand on the steering wheel.
They're staying on longer. It used to be that maybe you'd see 2 generations at any one time in the family business. We're seeing 3 and even 4 generations in the business at the same time. People are living longer. They're staying healthier longer. They want to be involved. They're not ready to go play golf and go fish and just sit and and watch CNN all day. They want to be active. And so we're seeing these generations stay in the business longer and longer, which creates different challenges and different opportunities at the same time.
Any other trends before we wrap this up that you're seeing that?
One of the greatest trends, which I'm so thrilled to see, is women in family businesses, that the women are growing into leadership roles. And I love it. I just think it's been a long time coming. It's an awesome opportunity. There's no reason why we can't be embracing and supporting that 1,000%. And it is definitely a growing trend in family business. And I think it's awesome.
100% agree with you and like that trend as well. Those who are just starting businesses, the number of minority and women started entrepreneurial companies is staggering. I mean, It's so different than what we saw baby boomers, generation. So it's good to know. Okay, so you're a principal at the Family Business Consulting Group. You also have your own business. How and where can people reach you, and where do they reach you through? Which channel?
So the best way is to reach me through the Family Business Consulting Group. My email is karofsky@thefbcg.com. That's my bio, all the information. You can go on to Family Business Consulting Group's website at thefbcg.com. We just redesigned the website this year, so you should go and check it out. It's pretty amazing. The team did an incredible job doing it, and just a lot of great content. That's definitely the easiest way to get a hold of me, and would be happy to have a conversation with anybody or about anything regarding the world of family business.
Fantastic. And David, it was great to have you on the show. As our listeners might realize, David and I do similar work. He's well more versed and experienced, and has worked with a lot more family businesses. But secret, he's invited me to join him on maybe an engagement or 2. So stay tuned. So this is the Disruptive Successor Show. Jonathan Goldhill, a podcast for and about and by family business owners. And thank you very much to our guest, David Karofsky.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for joining us on the Disruptive Successor podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, review, and share with a friend who would benefit from the message. If you're interested in picking up a copy of my book, Disruptive Successor, go to disruptivesuccessor.com.